The highway lights flickered against the late afternoon haze as traffic roared down I-74, a restless river of chrome and steel. Officer Riley Mendoza kept her cruiser steady in the right lane, one hand on the wheel, the other resting near the K9 kennel behind her. Inside it, Thor, a Belgian Malinois known across the county for his precision and cold discipline, lay silent, alert, but still. Then it happened. Thor shot up, his ears slicing the air. A low growl rolled from deep within his chest, vibrating through the steel frame of the kennel. Before Riley could speak, he slammed his paws against the door, barking, no, demanding, with a force she had never heard from him. "Thor, what is it?" she whispered. But the dog wasn't listening. He clawed, twisted, lunged. Riley's instincts flared. She slammed the brakes, bringing the cruiser to a halt along the emergency lane as horns blared behind her. Thor burst out the moment the door cracked open. He didn't run forward. He ran back, toward a worn section of asphalt beneath the overpass bridge. And then, with a trembling exhale, he lay down, not resting, not in pain, listening. Riley knelt beside him, confused, until a faint, impossible sound rose through the pavement. A knock, and then another. Her breath froze. Thor hadn't lost control. He had found someone beneath the asphalt. Before the chaos on the highway, before the barking and the brakes, Officer Riley Mendoza lived in rhythms, predictable, measured, almost too quiet for someone who wore a badge. Her mornings began in the dim locker rooms of the county sheriff's department, where the smell of old leather and disinfectant clung to everything. She was one of the youngest officers on the K9 team, a calm face in a division built on hardened veterans. People liked her, trusted her. But beneath her steady tone and soft eyes, Riley carried something heavy, an ache folded deep into the past. Years ago, her little brother Mateo had died on a highway not far from here, a hit and run. No suspects, no closure, just silence. The pavement had swallowed his final moments, and the world simply moved on. Since then, Riley had sworn one promise: no one else would be forgotten on the road. It was that promise that led her to K9 work, where instinct mattered as much as reason. Thor, however, was a different story. He was new to her unit, transferred after his handler retired early for medical reasons. The files described him in sharp, clinical terms: high drive, reactive under stress, exceptionally intelligent, limited handler bonding. Officers joked that Thor didn't work with people. He tolerated them. But Riley saw something else when she first met him. Not aggression, not coldness. A distance, a barrier. A dog who watched everything but allowed no one to truly see him. Their first weeks together were rough. Thor followed commands, but not her tone. He moved beside her, but never toward her. There were moments, brief ones, when she sensed a flicker of trust, an unspoken question in his eyes. Then it would vanish, replaced with rigid control. Still, Riley believed in him. Maybe because she knew what it felt like to hold grief so tightly that it hardened into instinct. Their routine soon became familiar. Afternoon patrols across the city's aging highway system, traffic stops, welfare checks, and the silent stretches where Thor would lift his head, sniff the air, and settle again. Riley learned the rhythm of his breathing, the way his tail barely twitched when he focused, the subtle shift of muscle under fur when something caught his attention. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared her for what he did that day, when Thor launched himself toward that forgotten patch of asphalt, when he refused to move, when he pressed his ear to the ground like he was listening to the heartbeat of the earth. Riley felt the world tilt. She had seen trained K9s detect drugs, explosives, weapons, fugitives. But this, whatever Thor sensed, was different. It wasn't danger. It felt like a call only a creature like him could hear. Thor didn't just walk onto the K9 team. He arrived like a storm that refused to explain itself. Ever since Riley took over as his handler, she noticed something unmistakable about the Belgian Malinois. Other dogs wagged their tails when officers approached, leaned into scratches, barked in excitement before shifts. Thor was different. His presence felt charged, as if every muscle beneath his coat held a memory he refused to let go of. His fur was a deep sable, glowing like burnished bronze under the station's fluorescent lights. His ears stood tall, alert at the slightest tremor. Even when he rested, his chest rose and fell with a quiet, deliberate cadence, as if he was always listening, even in sleep. But it was his eyes that struck Riley the most. Most canines had bright, eager expressions, windows of pure instinct. Thor's eyes were darker, deeper, as though they held echoes of every place he'd been, every call he had answered. When he looked at her, it wasn't the glance of a dog awaiting a command. It felt like he was assessing her, asking a question she couldn't quite understand. There were whispers around the station about what happened to Thor's previous handler. Officer Hale, respected, experienced, steady, had retired early after a rescue gone wrong. The file didn't say much, only that Thor had been found beside Hale, refusing to leave his side until backup arrived. Some officers claimed Thor hadn't been the same since. Others believed he simply didn't trust anyone new. Riley didn't push him. She learned to approach him quietly, offering space instead of commands, patience instead of pressure. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, Thor responded. Not with affection, but with awareness. Like he was turning his ear toward a voice he hadn't decided to trust yet. On their patrols, she noticed how Thor interacted with the world. Most dogs scanned for movement. Thor scanned for meaning. His nose swept the wind in slow arcs. His ears rotated independently, tracking sounds beyond human reach. The distant hum of a stalled engine, the metallic clatter of a loose guardrail bolt, the uneven thrum of tires over a cracked lane divider. Nothing escaped him. Sometimes, when traffic thinned and twilight settled over the highway, Thor would sit up abruptly. His silhouette stretched under the fading sun, chest lifted, nostrils flaring as if catching something hidden beneath the ordinary noise. Riley would follow his gaze into the horizon, sensing something rising in him, some instinct older than training. It was during one of those quiet evenings that Riley truly saw him, not as a tool, not as a challenge, but as a creature whose senses ran deeper than human logic could trace. There was a gravity to him, a weight that settled into the air when he concentrated. A sense that Thor didn't just detect danger, he detected truth, and that truth was about to tear open the asphalt beneath their feet. The first sign came quietly, so quietly that Riley almost dismissed it as nothing. It was 3 weeks before the incident on I-74. A cold Monday evening, sky bruised purple, traffic thin and moody. Riley and Thor had been assigned to a simple patrol: loop the northern stretch of the interstate, check in with road crews repairing an aging overpass, then return to the station by nightfall. She remembered the moment clearly because nothing unusual was supposed to happen. They were passing the old bridge, the same one Thor would later bring them back to, when the Malinois suddenly stiffened. Not a flinch, not a twitch. His entire body went still, ears locked forward, eyes narrowing as though he were catching a signal beneath all the noise. Riley slowed the cruiser, glancing at him through the rearview mirror. "What is it, boy?" Thor didn't bark. He didn't growl. He simply listened. Riley followed his stare toward the cracked concrete pillars, the freshly patched asphalt, the heavy machinery resting idle beside the shoulder. Nothing moved. The air smelled of diesel and dust. The only sound was the distant thrum of an 18-wheeler lumbering past. But Thor kept staring, downward, not toward the bridge, toward the road beneath them. Riley pulled over, stepped out, and let Thor lead. His paws touched the cold surface of the asphalt, nails clicking softly. He lowered his head, sniffing once, twice, then stopped at a faded patch where the pavement looked a shade darker, like an old scar the road had tried to hide. He pressed his ear to it. Riley frowned. She had seen K9s track missing persons, drugs, bodies. She had seen them detect explosives buried under soil. But she had never seen a dog press its ear against a highway, as if trying to hear a whisper inside the earth. "Thor, come on, nothing's here." Her voice wavered, because she didn't believe her own words. She tugged gently on his lead. Thor resisted for a heartbeat, then rose and followed. But with a backward glance, she couldn't forget. A look that wasn't confusion or fear, it was warning. Back at the station, Riley mentioned the behavior during debrief. The sergeant shrugged. "Old overpass. Vibrates weird. Trucks make a low resonance under there. Dogs pick it up. Nothing to worry about." Another officer chimed in with a laugh. "Thor's just got hypersensitive ears. The guy can probably hear worms digging." Everyone laughed. Everyone except Thor, who lay in his kennel, eyes open, gaze fixed on some point far beyond the concrete walls. Riley tried to shake off the unease, but something in Thor's posture haunted her. It was too deliberate, too urgent, as if he had heard something small, something fragile, something struggling, something the rest of the world had learned to ignore. And that was only the beginning. The second time it happened, there were no excuses left. No trucks rumbling by, no construction crews drilling into concrete, no vibration anyone could blame. It was a bright Thursday afternoon, sky clear as glass, wind sharp with early autumn chill. Riley and Thor were on routine patrol again, cruising past the same old stretch of highway. Traffic was steady, humming with predictable rhythm. Riley hummed quietly to the radio as Thor rested, calm, collected, until they neared the overpass. Without warning, Thor's head snapped up. His body tightened like a coiled spring. A growl rumbled from deep in his chest, low and vibrating, sinking into Riley's bones. His eyes, usually sharp, were now laser-focused on a single point ahead. "No, not again," Riley whispered. But it was happening again. As the cruiser rolled closer, Thor lunged forward in the kennel, claws scraping metal, barking with fierce urgency. Not aggression, insistence. Riley's pulse spiked. She pulled over at the same spot as before. The same faded scar of asphalt. The same silence pressing against the edges of her hearing. "All right," she murmured, opening the back door. "Show me." Thor leapt out, not with the reckless energy of an excited K9, but with purposeful intent. His paws hit the pavement, and immediately he lowered his head to the ground again, ears twitching, breath slow, and controlled like he was filtering sounds layer by layer. Then something new happened. Thor let out a sharp, cutting bark, once, then twice, before circling the patch of asphalt as though mapping something beneath it. He stopped suddenly, positioning himself diagonally across the road. His tail stiffened. His gaze locked. He lay down again. Exactly like the first time. But this time, Riley wasn't the only one who noticed. A passing state trooper slowed, rolled down his window, and called out, "Everything all right? Dog having a moment?" Riley forced a smile. "He's picking up something. Not sure what." The trooper shrugged. "Probably underground pipes. Resonance travels funny here." That word again. Resonance. As if easy explanations could silence the unease curling in Riley's chest. Thor didn't even look up. His ear pressed hard against the pavement, his breath shaking. Riley crouched beside him, placing a hand gently on his back. His muscles were tight, trembling. Not in fear, but concentration. It felt like he was waiting or listening, again. Riley stood there longer than she intended, scanning the quiet overpass, the steel beams creaking softly above, the distant thrum of engines. Nothing changed. Nothing explained Thor's fixation. But as she watched him refuse to move, something inside her shifted. This wasn't a quirk. It wasn't a false alarm. It was a pattern. And patterns meant one thing. Thor was trying to tell her something, something buried deeper than anyone wanted to admit. The third warning didn't come from Thor. It came from a stranger's voice, shaky, uncertain, and dismissed before anyone even listened. It was a Sunday evening when the 911 dispatcher logged the call. Riley wasn't on shift yet, but she heard about it the moment she stepped into the station. The report was simple, almost laughable to most officers. A driver claimed the highway was knocking. That was the actual phrase. Knocking. The caller, a middle-aged trucker, said he'd been driving across the old I-74 overpass when he felt a strange bump. Not the kind that comes from hitting debris. Not the kind caused by uneven pavement. He described it as a vibration from underneath, followed by what he swore sounded like tapping, soft, faint, but real. He'd pulled over, checked his tires, checked his trailer, checked everything he could. Nothing. The tapping continued for a full minute. He even pressed his hand against the pavement and felt a tiny pulse. When he relayed this to dispatch, the response was polite but predictable. No signs of danger, sir. Perhaps road settling, temperature changes, or echo from a passing vehicle. By the time the story reached the station's briefing room, it had turned into a joke. Maybe the highway's haunted. Probably squirrels. Or worms trying to unionize. Laughter rolled across the room. Everyone laughed, except Riley. Because she'd heard something similar before. Not with her ears, but through Thor. Through the way he listened, the way he froze, the way he insisted something was wrong beneath that exact stretch of pavement. When the sergeant ended the briefing, Riley lingered, pulling up the recorded 911 call from the terminal. The trucker's breathing was uneven, his tone almost embarrassed. "I know it sounds crazy, but something's off. I've been driving these roads 22 years. I know what bad pavement feels like. This wasn't that. Something was moving under there." A chill zipped down Riley's spine. She closed the file and walked toward the kennels. Thor stood before she even reached him, ears perked, eyes alert, as if he sensed her unease. "You knew," she whispered. Thor stepped closer, pressing his head gently against her thigh, his first spontaneous gesture of connection. It wasn't affection. It was affirmation. Like he was saying, "You're finally listening." Still, Riley was alone. No one else believed there was anything to investigate. No one wanted to close down a highway based on a dog's instinct and a trucker's strange story. But the warnings were growing louder, stronger, closer. And whatever was beneath that asphalt was running out of time. By the time the third incident arrived, Thor was no longer hinting. He was begging for someone to understand. It happened at dawn, inside the K9 wing of the station. The hallways were quiet, washed in pale blue light, the entire building barely waking. Riley had arrived early, hoping to review patrol logs, but before she reached her desk, she heard it. Scratch, 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 rapid, desperate. It echoed down the hallway like something trapped. She rushed toward the kennels, heart pounding, and found Thor standing, not calmly, not alert, but in a frantic state she had never seen before. His paws were scraping the concrete floor, clawing the same spot over and over, until white dust collected beneath his nails. His chest heaved. His ears flicked back and forth, tracking sounds Riley couldn't hear. His tail wasn't raised in aggression, only straight, stiff, trembling. "Thor! Hey, hey boy, look at me!" He didn't. He kept scraping, not toward the bars, not toward the door, but downward. Riley unlocked the kennel, and Thor barreled out, heading straight for the hallway floor, as if something beneath the concrete was calling him. He laid down, suddenly, hard, pressing his ear flat to the cold surface. Riley crouched beside him. "Is it the same thing, the overpass?" Thor didn't move, didn't blink. His breathing slowed, deepened, sinking with something she couldn't sense. Then he whimpered. Just once. A sound she had never heard from him. A sound that cracked her wide open. She placed her hand on the floor next to his head, feeling nothing but cool concrete. But her skin crawled with a chilling intuition. Whatever Thor was hearing now, it was getting closer and louder. Minutes later, the other K9 handlers arrived. Thor didn't lift his head. The men exchanged looks. Is he sick? Maybe inner ear infection. Could be stress. Or ghosts, one joked. Riley didn't laugh. She guided Thor outside into the morning air, hoping fresh scents would settle him. But the moment they stepped into the lot, Thor lunged toward the patrol vehicles, toward Riley's cruiser specifically, and scratched at the back door. "You want to go back?" she whispered. Thor barked once, short and urgent. No hesitation, no confusion. He wanted to return to the highway, but the shift schedule didn't allow it. Riley wasn't assigned to road patrol that morning. Another unit had taken the route. She tried to coax Thor away, but he refused to move, grounding himself like a rooted tree. It took 3 handlers to guide him back inside. Even then, Thor's eyes locked onto Riley with fierce determination, pleading, demanding, warning. Something was happening beneath that road. Something alive. Something weakening. Something counting on him. And Thor knew the clock was almost out. Riley would never forget the sound Thor made just seconds before everything changed. It was early afternoon, sunlight bouncing off the chrome of passing cars, as Riley and Thor finally returned to patrol duty. She requested, no, insisted, on being assigned to the northern stretch. The sergeant rolled his eyes but approved it. Better to let the dog get it out of his system, he said. But Riley knew better. Thor wasn't acting out. Thor was tracking something. As they approached the overpass for the first time that shift, Thor rose inside the kennel without a sound. Slow, deliberate, as if bracing for impact. Then he lunged. Riley didn't even have time to pull over. She slammed on the brakes, hard in her throat, hazard lights flashing as vehicles swerved around her. Thor burst out the moment the door opened. He sprinted to the exact same faded patch of asphalt, then slammed his body down onto it so hard that Riley gasped. He wasn't sniffing. He wasn't observing. He was responding. "Thor!" Riley knelt beside him, pressing her palm to his ribcage. His heartbeat raced like a drumline, his breath shaking. His ear was smashed so tightly against the asphalt that she feared he might injure himself. And then she heard it. A sound so faint she questioned her own senses. Tap. Riley froze. Her breath vanished. Then, tap, tap, soft, hollow, from beneath. She pressed her other ear down, brow scraping the pavement. At first, there was only the hum of distant traffic. Then, a tremor. A tiny vibration, like someone striking metal with weak fingers. "God!" Riley whispered. "Someone's down there." Her voice wavered. But Thor reacted instantly, eyes locking onto hers, muscles stiffening as if saying, "Yes, finally." Riley shot to her feet and grabbed her radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 4K9. I need immediate response teams to mile marker 221 under the West Overpass. Possible entrapment beneath the roadway. Repeat, possible entrapment." Static. Then disbelief. "Unit 4K9, clarify. Entrapment where?" "Under the asphalt," Riley snapped. "I know how it sounds. Just move." Within minutes, the scene transformed. Patrol cars boxed off the emergency lane. Road maintenance crews rushed in. Curious drivers slowed to film with phones. The air grew heavy with sirens, dust, and tension. Thor never moved. His ears stayed pressed to the ground, his tail stiff, his eyes locked ahead like a soldier guarding a heartbeat. An engineer knelt beside Riley. "What exactly did you hear?" Riley swallowed hard. "Tapping. And breathing, I think." The man paled. He placed his sonic sensor onto the pavement. Within 5 seconds, he looked up with horror in his eyes. "There's someone alive down there!" Thor lifted his head, finally, his gaze blazing with triumph and urgency. The truth wasn't just knocking anymore. It was screaming. The engineers moved fast, but the fear in their eyes moved faster. Within minutes, they had deployed ground microphones, thermal scanners, and a compact geophone normally used for landslide detection. Riley knelt beside Thor, one hand resting on his shoulder as he continued to stare at the asphalt like it was holding the last heartbeat on Earth. The lead engineer, a graying man named Lawson, crouched near the faded patch of pavement. He pressed the geophone to the surface and adjusted the dial. At first there was only static, then a faint vibration. Lawson's eyebrows knitted. He increased the sensitivity. A second vibration, a tiny echo, rhythmic, weak, human. His voice dropped to a chilling whisper. "Someone's trapped under a cavity, deep." Riley's stomach twisted. "How deep?" Lawson swallowed. 6 to 8 feet, maybe more. And not soil, AR. He pointed at the pavement. "There's an empty space down there." Another engineer jogged over, tablet in hand. Thermal readings show a heat signature, small, moving slowly. Riley's breath hitched. "How long could someone survive in a sealed space like that?" "That depends on air pockets," Lawson replied grimly. "But if they're still tapping, they're conscious, which means we're running out of time." As if on cue, the tapping returned, louder now. 3 taps. A pause. 2 taps. Thor jerked his head toward the sound, ears rigid. His muscles bunched, like he was ready to tear the asphalt apart with his own teeth. The crew didn't waste time. They marked the area with spray paint and began detouring traffic. More units arrived. A fire truck, an ambulance, a utility operations van. Reporters hovered at the perimeter, sniffing for a story. The entire highway felt like it was holding its breath. Lawson turned to Riley. "We're checking old city records. This section of the interstate was built over an older structure. Could be a condemned maintenance tunnel, storm runoff line, or..." A radio operator interrupted him, voice cracking with urgency. "Archive confirms it. There was a utility tunnel under this stretch. Decommissioned 21 years ago. Entrance sealed. Records say partial collapse after heavy flooding." Riley stared at the ground beneath her feet. "A tunnel no one uses. No one checks." Lawson finished the thought for her. "And someone fell in, or got trapped in what's left." Before Riley could respond, Thor suddenly rose, barked sharply, and moved 10 feet to the left, then planted himself again, ear to the ground. Lawson recalibrated the scanner in that spot. His face went white. "The void shifts here. There are 2 chambers, and the heat signature is strongest at the intersection." Riley's pulse hammered. Thor wasn't just detecting life. He was marking exactly where it was dying. The team scrambled to reposition equipment. Drills roared to life. The pavement trembled. Thor didn't flinch. He had waited days for this moment. And someone beneath them was waiting too. The roar of the rescue drills sliced through the air, filling the overpass with vibrations that rattled in Riley's bones. Dust floated like gray snowflakes as workers carved into the asphalt, carefully, methodically, every second a gamble between saving a life and triggering a collapse. Thor stayed ahead of them, moving with uncanny precision. It wasn't random. It wasn't instinct alone. It was as if he could feel the breathing of the earth itself. Every time a drill bit sank too deep or too close to a structural weak spot, Thor would leap up, bark sharply, and reposition himself a few feet away, forcing the crew to adjust. At first, they hesitated, glancing to Lawson for approval, but the engineer quickly realized the pattern. "He's not guessing," Lawson muttered. "He knows where the cavity walls are," Riley swallowed, voice tight. "He's mapping the collapse zones." Thor circled again, nose low, ears twitching at frequencies no instrument could match. He stopped at one particular point, just left of the initial drill site, and scratched at the pavement, claws scraping like signals of his own. Lawson scanned it. His eyes widened. "He's right. That section's thinner. If we break through here, we hit the air pocket directly." Thor lay down beside the spot, chest pressed to the asphalt, tail stiff, guarding it, claiming it. Workers adjusted their equipment. Firefighters knelt with crowbars and hydraulic tools. The air smelled of burning tar and tension. Then, pang! A metallic fracture reverberated from below. The ground shifted, just slightly, but enough for everyone to freeze. "Stop! Hold everything!" The shout came from Lawson. Tools powered down instantly. The ground trembled again, and a faint, unmistakable cry rose from beneath the asphalt. Not tapping, not vibration. A voice, a child's voice. Thor shot to his feet, barking, a sound so raw and urgent it pierced every heart around him. He ran back to the precise point, pushing his shoulder against the markings as if urging the crew. "Here. Now." "This is where they need you." Riley's breath broke. "Dig! Dig right there!" In seconds, crowbars wedged into the fissure, prying apart crumbling layers of old asphalt. Dust burned their eyes. The ground moaned with strain, and Thor stayed inches away, refusing to move, guiding them with every fiber of his being. The miracle wasn't that he found the life below. It was that he showed humans exactly how to reach it. The final layer of asphalt cracked with a sound like a bone snapping. A narrow fissure opened along the faded scar in the road, and cold, stale air rushed upward from the darkness below. Every rescuer froze, tools suspended mid-air, as if the highway itself had exhaled. Then, they heard it. A whimper. A tiny, trembling whimper. "Kid, can you hear me?" Lawson shouted into the opening. A fragile voice answered, muffled. "Barely alive." "Help!" Riley's throat tightened. The missing child, 5-year-old Ethan Hale, had vanished 36 hours earlier, triggering an amber alert across 3 counties. They had searched wooded trails, abandoned barns, drainage ditches. No one imagined he was under the highway. "Get the spreader!" a firefighter yelled. Hydraulic tools roared. Asphalt crumbled. The fissure widened inch by inch until a dark cavity yawned open. A forgotten utility chamber, no larger than a crawl space. Flashlights pierced the dust, and there he was. A small body curled in the corner, clothes torn, cheeks streaked with dirt and dried tears. His little hands clutched a broken metal pipe, his makeshift tool for tapping, for calling for help. Thor pushed forward, barking, not with aggression, but with desperate urgency. Riley caught him. One arm wrapped around his chest, but she didn't pull him away. She let him watch. Ethan's head lifted at the sound of Thor's bark. His eyes, sunken with exhaustion, widened. He lifted a trembling hand toward the noise. "Sound. Dog," he whispered. "Dog. Found me." "Yeah, buddy," Riley breathed. Her voice cracked. "He did." 2 firefighters dropped into the chamber, lifting Ethan carefully. His breathing was shallow, but steady. When he reached the surface, the boy blinked against the sunlight, confused, weak, alive. Thor stepped forward, slowly, reverently. He lowered his head until his nose touched the back of Ethan's tiny hand. The boy whimpered, not in fear, but in recognition, as if Thor's presence was the last piece of safety he needed. "He kept knocking," Ethan murmured. "I thought the dog could hear me." Riley felt tears tighten behind her eyes. Reporters snapped photos. Officers looked away, swallowing emotions they couldn't express. The world suddenly felt too bright, too loud, too miraculous. Thor exhaled, a soft, relieved sound. His job wasn't done. It was fulfilled. Long after the roar of machinery faded, long after Ethan was rushed to the ambulance and the crowd of officers, reporters, and engineers dispersed, the echoes of what happened on the highway still clung to the air like dust that refused to settle. Riley stayed behind. She stood at the edge of the broken road, staring at the gaping hole that had nearly become a tomb. The afternoon sun lowered, spilling gold across the asphalt, turning the jagged edges of the fissure into glowing borders of survival. Traffic had been rerouted miles away, leaving the entire area swallowed in an uncanny stillness. Thor sat beside her, silent, steady, almost regal in the fading light. For the first time since she'd known him, he wasn't tense. His muscles weren't coiled. His eyes weren't scanning. He simply rested. Riley knelt beside him, brushing dirt and asphalt dust from his coat. Thor leaned quietly into her touch, letting out a slow, steady breath, a release of days' worth of tension. It was the smallest gesture, but it struck her harder than anything else that day. "You knew," she whispered. "You knew from the beginning." Thor didn't move, not even a blink, but something in the set of his jaw, the softness in his gaze, felt like a confirmation, a warm, human confirmation. The rescue had shaken the entire department. Officers who once joked about haunted highways now stood in stunned silence when Riley walked past with Thor. The sergeant, normally stoic, placed a hand on Riley's shoulder and murmured, "You saved him. Your dog saved him." "No," Riley corrected gently, eyes drifting down to Thor. "He saved him. I just followed." That night, Riley visited the hospital, her footsteps echoing faintly down the pediatric recovery wing. Ethan's parents were there, exhausted, pale, clinging to each other as though letting go for even a second might cause the world to crumble again. When they saw Riley, the mother rushed to her. She didn't speak. She just embraced Riley with a trembling force, tears hitting Riley's shoulder like warm rain. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank your dog. Thank him for bringing our baby home." Riley choked up. He hurt him. Long before any of us did." They led her into Ethan's room. The boy was awake, small wires attached to his wrist and chest, oxygen flowing gently into his nose. His eyes looked brighter than before, tired, but alive. When Ethan saw Riley, he smiled faintly. "Dog lady," he said. Riley laughed, wiping the corner of her eye. "That's me. Dog. Hero," the boy whispered. "Yeah," Riley said softly. "He really is." But the healing didn't belong only to Ethan. Later that night, when Riley walked back to her cruiser, she paused at the passenger side door, the one closest to Thor's kennel. The reflection of the moon shimmered on the window, casting a cool silver glow over the metal. Riley rested her hand against it. "For years," she murmured, voice fragile, "I wondered if someone could have heard my brother. If someone, anyone, could have saved him." The memory tightened her chest. Mateo's face flickered through her mind. The laughter, the scrapes on his knees, the way he used to chase her around the front yard with a water gun. "But today, you heard him," she whispered to Thor. "You heard someone else's brother." Thor pressed his head against the glass from the inside, gaze locked onto hers. A simple gesture, a quiet one. But for Riley, it cracked something open. The grief she had buried under uniforms, shifts, and responsibility began to soften, not vanish, but shift just enough to breathe again. Thor didn't just save Ethan. He saved Riley, too. In the silence of the parking lot, beneath the soft glow of streetlights, she whispered, "Thank you, partner." And Thor, ever quiet, ever watching, blinked slowly, as if saying, "Always." 1 week later, the highway looked nothing like the place that had swallowed a child. Fresh asphalt covered the broken stretch. New guardrails gleamed under the morning sun. Orange cones still lined the shoulders. But now, they felt less like barriers and more like reminders, markers of where something extraordinary had happened. Riley parked her cruiser just outside the cordon zone. Thor hopped out with his usual steady discipline, but even he seemed different somehow, lighter, calmer, as if a long-held weight had finally slid off his shoulders. Today wasn't a patrol. Today was a reunion. As Riley approached the patched area, she saw a small group waiting. Ethan, pale but smiling, his parents, a few reporters, and even the usually stone-faced sergeant. Ethan held something in his hands, a colorful loop of beads, strung together on a long blue cord. A handmade collar. When the boy spotted Thor, he brightened instantly. "Dog hero!" he squeaked, breaking away from his mother's side. Thor didn't bark. He didn't lunge. Instead, he stepped forward slowly, lowering his head until Ethan's little hands could reach him. The boy slipped the beaded necklace around Thor's neck. The bright colors looked almost childlike against the dog's dark sable coat, an innocence clinging to strength. "It's for you," Ethan whispered, his voice still faint. "So everyone knows you hear things other people don't." Riley knelt beside them, her eyes stinging. "He'll be honored to wear it." Thor nudged Ethan's hand with his nose. And for a moment, the world softened. Even the breeze felt gentler, carrying the faint smell of warm tar and spring air. Ethan's father approached Riley, his voice thick. "We wanted to thank you, properly." "You don't have to." "But we do," the man insisted quietly. "Because you listened. You listened when no one else would." Riley swallowed. "Thor listened. I just followed." The sergeant stepped forward next, clearing his throat. "We're recommending Thor for commendation, possibly state honors. His instincts saved a life." Riley glanced down at her partner. Thor sat calmly, staring into the distance. But his ears twitched just slightly, as if he understood the weight of the moment. Still, none of the ceremonies, none of the press, none of the applause meant as much as what happened next. As the group prepared to leave, Ethan reached out and wrapped his tiny arms around Thor's neck. A full embrace. Thor froze for half a second, not out of discomfort but surprise. No one had ever hugged him like that. Then slowly he leaned in, resting his head gently against the child's shoulder. The cameras clicked. Reporters whispered. The sergeant blinked hard and looked away. But for Riley, everything went silent. No traffic, no voices, just the soft sound of a child's heartbeat pressed against a dog that once trusted no one. That moment, that quiet, shimmering moment, became the symbol of the entire rescue. A reminder that even the hardest creatures can learn softness. That even the deepest grief can find purpose. As they walked back to the cruiser, Riley glanced at Thor's new beaded collar glinting in the sun. It swayed with each step, catching colors, casting tiny reflections like fragments of a rainbow. She whispered, "You didn't just save him. You healed something none of us could see." Thor lifted his head, eyes warm, steady. Some heroes bark, some heroes bite, but some listen. And in listening, they save the world in ways humans never could. In the quiet moments after a rescue, when the sirens fade, when the road grows still again, and when the world returns to its usual rhythm, something remains. A heartbeat, a memory, a paw print. Thor taught everyone on that highway a truth we often forget. Heroes don't always roar. Sometimes they listen. Sometimes they're the only ones who can hear the cries the world has learned to ignore. And sometimes, in the most unexpected places, beneath an old overpass, under layers of noise and doubt, A single act of instinct becomes a miracle that changes lives. Riley followed a dog that trusted its senses more than logic. Ethan survived because someone, four-legged, refused to stay silent. And somewhere in between those two hearts, hope found its way through the cracks of a forgotten road. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that courage comes in all shapes, sizes, and species, then you're already part of our family. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because every paw print has a story, and some stories deserve to be heard.